no, history of anti-Semitism more.
Okay.
So yes, I changed a little bit the title of my conference, and I think Aaron will understand why. Okay, let's go. Let's try to understand. Let's try to understand what anti-Semitism is or is not.
I thought the bicyclists.
Yes, exactly. Or hairdressers. It depends. In French, it's going to be hairdressers. So, what seems to be important to begin with is to remind us some evidence, but not for everyone actually. And the first evidence will be that there are no historical inevitability to hatred of Jews. And we have this hypothesis of an endless anti-Semitism, and it has no historical foundation, because we know that in pre-Christian North Africa, in China, and in India, Jews not suffered from any particular discrimination. But of course, this is far from us. But if you think even during the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic, the Jews were in good condition, despite the fact that there was a war between Rome and Judea. The fact is that Jews could become citizens, they could practice their religion, etc., and there are no trace of anti-Semitism. And I will define anti-Semitism, my definition of anti-Semitism, because always you have to define, as you remember what I said yesterday, anti-Semitism is the fact that you believe that the Jews are responsible of the war or the disasters of the world, etc., and no Roman emperor would declare that the destruction of Pompeii was because, I don't know, a Jewish influence whatsoever or plague whatsoever. Though there are no traces of what I call anti-Semitism. Anti-Judaism is different, and during this conference I will make a differentiation, absolute differentiation between anti-Judaism, the fact that you hate or that you despise Judaism as a religion, and the fact, and anti-Semitism, it's not Judaism as such, it's the Jews being responsible of the disasters of the world, etc. And so it means that the first idea, there are no responsibility of the Jews in the rejection of which they are subjected. And even before the Crusades, in France, for instance, before the Crusade, it means till the year 1000, Jews live in some good condition. Let us remember Rashi, the very famous commentator of the Talmud. Well, not only that he was, a rabbi, etc., that he could work and commentate the Talmud, but also he was a vigneron. How would you say? He had vineyards. So he was, in a sense, an active subject of the King of France, and actually was writing in Franco-Hebrew, and etc. So this is important to say. And the other thing is, as I said, one shouldn't confuse between anti-Judea as a state, and this was the problem with the Romans, and anti-Semitism, and, as I repeat, anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Well, if you have to, on one adjective, to define anti-Judaism, it's going to be contempt, mépris in French, etc. And anti-Semitism will be fear, the fact that we fear the Jews, etc. So, the second idea is, and what seems to be also important, that what characterizes, in a certain sense, the Jews is their will to integrate. It doesn't mean to assimilate, to integrate, not to be different. And it seems to be the right to resemblance rather than the right than difference. And you can see that Jews has a capacity of assimilation, of integration. Let us remember that in Alexandria, during the Hellenistic time and the Roman Republic, the Jew asked the Bible to be translated into Greek. It was the 70, I don't know how you say, 70 version, la version des 70. Voilà, thank you. And the rest. And you know that Maimonides was writing in Arabic. And you know that, as I say, Rashi was writing in Franco-Hebrew, etc. And you know that the Spanish, intellectual during the Christian Spanish, were writing, and they were speaking, of course, Spanish, and the German Jews, etc., were excellent. Let's think about Heinrich Heine in German. So this seems to be important, and a good example of this is the desire to integration, is the fact that Jews look like the population where they live. You will find the Hellenistic Jew. This is a representation in a synagogue today in Syria, Dura Europos. Indian Jew, Indian, you know, from Ethiopia. This is the Moroccan Jew. He looks like a Muslim, but he's a Moroccan Jew. Those are Jews from Thessaloniki, you know, during, of course, the period when it was Ottoman. It was the second city of Selanik, of the Ottoman Empire. Jews, Chinese Jews, I'm sorry. And this man, the gingy man, look, he is a Jew from Germany. And how do we know he is a Jew? How do we know that this man is a Jew? Of course, because he's marked. And why do you think that you mark the Jews? It's because they looks like the people where they are. It means that this is why, finally, you know, the fact that the differentiation of the Jew dates from the Arabic, you know, world in 8th century. The Jews had to wear in Baghdad yellow belt, and the Christian a blue belt, and then it will be La Ruelle. This is another representation. Wow, look, this is incredible, look. 21st century. And this is the same one. And of course the yellow star imposed by the Nazis during the Second World War. Another example is, look, this portrait of these wonderful Nazi soldiers was put in one of the main magazine, Berliner Tagesblatt, in 1940 after the victory of the German army against the Polish people. And unfortunately, they realized that this man, in fact, was half Jew. This name, he was called Werner Goldberg. Well, his father was a Jew, but his mother was an Aryan, so he was not killed. Well, he was just expelled from the army in April 1940, which means that he won't participate to the war against France. But even if a Jew could look like this man, the reality is that there will be the illustrator will invent. How would you say? They will portray the Jew with certain characteristics, and this is a postcard. And you know, the postcards before the First World War are equivalent to what we are now the emails. It means there were billions of postcards because there were no telephone, there were no radio, there were no television, etc. And one of the best way, you know, to know the world, the population, the expansion of the colonies and the new invention, the train, whatsoever, was through postcards. And of course, anti-Semitism was very present in the postcards. And this is an example. We are in France, 1904, 1905, just before the law of the separation between the church and the state. And look how the Jews are portrayed. And they are mock, of course, by definition, because, of course, they're ugly. They've got special characteristics, and also the practice is horrible, because what they do to the children, they do to the money. You know, it's the same. So another example of representation of the Jews. One is an Austrian card, the other one is a Russian postcards, etc. And immediately you will recognize a Jew. Immediately you will. But if Jews would like this, you didn't need, not like this, you wouldn't need a sign, of course. No, I have no time. After. Don't be afraid. We will have the time. So.
I just have, like, where would you buy these postcards?
On the market, on the.
Like, there'd be like a rack with like different. Here's a pretty picture.
Of course you can. It's of course. It means then or now. Then. There were, you know, you have to imagine it was extremely popular. There were a lot of merchants in the streets, etc. And by definition, and you will find thousands of those postcards, etc. And this is another one asking a very important, of course, into comma question is, who looks more like an ape? A black man or a Jew? Well, you would say, of course, it's a black man. But of course not, he's a Jew. Despite the fact that he looks like us, that he's dressed like us, despite the fact that he believes he is like us, a Western European, etc. No, look his profile. And this is the kind of postcards that you could find. So
with the rat.
What?
With the rat.
Yeah. So, as I told you yesterday, the Jews helped to explain what went wrong. I won't repeat it because I have not so much time. And this is a good example that I didn't show yesterday to show that Jews are the explanation of what went wrong. And there was a debate on Egyptian TV, you can read, and the Sheikh claims that there is a Jewish plot to decrease Egypt's population, and the intellectual, the political sociologists claim that the plot is to increase it. So anyway, decrease or increase, it's the fault of the Jews. And this is the essence, I would say, of anti-Semitism. So the third idea is that anti-Semitism is a cultural code, and I said it yesterday, that affects even society without Jews. And let us remember, there were less than 1% of Jews in Germany when Hitler took power. And this is important to repeat, and we spoke about the fact that Shakespeare wrote anti-Semitic, or I don't know, anti-Jewish, more or less, a theater play with Shylock, and there were no Jews in England since 1290. And he told me there were 60 Jews in London.
60 families.
60 families in London. Well, it's not so much anyway.
And allegedly he had contact with Jews.
Okay, so anti-Semitism doesn't tell us about Jews, but society in crisis or in profound change. It means mutation. And according to me, but you can disagree, it's a social disease, it's a collective psychosis. And what we call the Jewish question is not a Jewish question. It's a Christian question and it's a Muslim question. It's not a Jewish question. And this is important also. And the basic idea, I repeat for the 10,000 times, Jews are responsible for the woes of the world. Remember what I said yesterday about COVID-19, etc. The question is why? And not only because it's the scapegoat, it's too easy. Why did the Jews were chosen as scapegoat? This is important. And I will try to explain to you according to me. And for me, anti-Semitism, or at the beginning anti-Judaism, is an hostility limited to the Abrahamic religion. It means that the rejection, the hostility towards the Jews should be considered within the precise temporal and spatial framework of the installation on both sides of the Mediterranean on Christianity and Islam, two religions directly born from Judaism, and of course rivals. A little bit like you can say McDonald's or and Burger King or Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. It means who will conquer the market, etc. And so they're extremely near. They're not so different. The only difference between, I would say, a Christian and a Jew is to know if Jesus is the Messiah announced by the Torah. Or if Muhammad is the prophet, the last prophet, they will fulfill, what Judaism said. This is the only. So it's a competing phase, but the problem is that Judaism is also the matrix of Christianity and Islam. You cannot understand Christianity or you cannot understand Islam if you don't use the concept invented by the Jews. Prophecy, apocalypse, Messiah, etc. They are Jewish concept, etc. And of course, what is anti-Judaism? And this is not anti-Semitism. I make a big difference, I will repeat it again, between anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism. So, anti-Judaism, it's a logical, I would say, opposition to the Father that will inspire the relationship between Judaism and the two other religions. And let us remember that the worst problem is between families. The first murder in the Bible is between Abel and Cain. If you're interested in the Roman history, you will say the first murder is between Romulus and Remus. There were two brothers, etc. So Christianity and Islam will logically come to a position to oppose their mother religion. It means to exist, sometimes you have to kill the father. And who is the father? Of course, it's Judaism, etc. But there is a problem. Why it's the problem? Because it's not so easy to kill the father. Because, of course, both Christianism and Islam claim the heritage of Judaism. But the problem is, how could you claim to inherit from a person who does not acknowledge you and, above all, does not intend to die? Because Judaism is still there. That's a problem. The second problem is, as I said, the Gospel as the Quran are essentially based on biblical stories, etc. As I said, it means the narrative. What is important for the Muslim is to pretend that they are connected to the Bible, and they will look in the Bible who could be their ancestor, and they will see who? Ishmael, one of the first son of Abraham. And they will look in the Bible. As a Roman, if you remember Virgil, he won't look to the Bible for the Roman people. He will look to what is the most important book in the antiquities for pagans, of course, to Iliad, the Odyssey. And he will see Aeneas, and he will say this is the ancestor of the Romans. And then the same, if you want to understand Buddhism, you don't have to go to the Bible or to the Odyssey. You will go to the script of Hinduism, etc. So that's the problem. They're based on biblical stories. And it means that those who refuse to disappear, the Jews, control the original and holy myths. And of course, the holy myths, as I say, they are essentially Sumerian myths. But nobody knows it at the beginning. And this is an example of, you know, the Noah flood, which is essential in the story in the Bible, in fact, has been invented 2,000 years before. And this is an example of a tablet who was found and who explained the story of Noah. It means that also Judaism belongs to, it means the narrative of the Middle East, etc. So that's why I will characterize anti-Judaism and not anti-Semitism as a neurosis. And you know the difference? Well, there's a psychiatrist who have to be careful, but anyway, I don't care. So the difference between a neurosis and a psychosis. For a noble person, 1 + 1 means 2. For a psychotic, 1 and 1 will be 3, 2,000, 1 million, etc. For a neurotic man, 1 and 1 means 1. There are many neurotic people here, please. Those who love should answer. So it means 2, but the problem is the response makes me uncomfortable, and this is the problem with neurosis, etc. So the father of Christianity, the father of Islam, they know where they come from, but they don't want to acknowledge it. They know the legacy of Judaism, but it's difficult to assume it. And this is also what we call dissonance cognitive, cognitive dissonance. And a dissonance occurs when a person is confronted with information that is not consistent with their beliefs. And this is the essence, I would say, of anti-Judaism, etc. An example. Thank God I've got a PowerPoint. It's so easy. I can read my paper. And so let's take the example of dissonance cognitive. You've got the Abraham sacrifice. So he was ordered to sacrifice his son. Of course, according to the gospel, according to the Bible, it's Isaac. But in certain hadith, it's not Isaac, it's Ishmael. And who is wrong? Who is right? Well, of course, the Bible was written 1,000 years before the Quran, and not speak about the hadith, etc. So the father of Islam, they know it, etc. This is part of the dissonance cognitive. But of course, the answer is important. If it's Isaac, it means that it's the Jewish people who's got a special relation with God. If it's Ishmael, of course, it will be more the Arabic people. And of course, according to me, Abraham never exists. It's a myth, but who cares? They believe that he exists. I'm an atheist. So, and there is one sentence that you should, I think, remember after my talk, is made by Daniel Sibony, who is a physicist, who is a doctor of philosophy, doctor of physics, etc. And it's this incredible, and it summarizes exactly what I want to tell you is the origin of the hatred is the hatred of the origin. And define everything. It's so clear. And you understand.
Say it again.
Right? Read it. The origin of the hatred is the hatred of the origin. The origin is Judaism. A religion? Yeah, it's an incredible. It's an incredible quote. It's not mine, unfortunately. So, and what it seems to be important is you shouldn't confuse between, as I said, anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. And I will explain to you why, because it's important always to explain. So, anti-Judaism is until the 12th century, not 19th century. It's not because a concept was invented in 19th century that it doesn't apply for situation before. For instance, the concept of genocide was invented between 1942 and 1943 by Raphael Lemkin to describe the Shoah. But I use it for the genocide of the Armenians and 1915. So, okay. The concept apply. The same thing we speak about the assassination of Julius Caesar. But, you know, the word assassin comes from the Arabic, hashishin. And we use it, it means, okay, and that's like this. So according to me, anti-Semitism dates back, and I will explain to you later, 12th century, not 19th century. Because the basic idea to consider the Jews as responsible or evil people, it's 12th century, it's not 19th century. So, and this seems to, and as I say, the difference is disdain and obsessive fear if you speak about anti-Semitism, etc. What is anti-Judaism? It's a rational opposition. What do you mean rational opposition? It means anti-Judaism condemns Judaism for what it is, and what is Judaism? It's a rival, and as I said, a matrix face. It's the origin, etc. And the Jews are blamed for what they are, people opposing here the sanctity of Christ, there of Muhammad, and also for the real action and difference. They pray on Shabbat in a synagogue and not on Friday in a mosque or in Sunday in a church, and which shows the centrality of Judaism. Huh? Friday, Sunday, and Saturday and Sunday, etc. And they celebrate Passover, not Easter. They respect Yom Kippur and not Lent or Ramadan, etc. So the quarrel is theological order and, as I said, logical if we think of the exclusivism of the monotheist faith. And even if you will find in Talmud very hostile consideration against Christianity, describing, you know, Jesus as the son of a prostitute and Roman legionnaire. And this is reality. This is, I would say, you have to destroy the, the opposed faith. So anti-Semitism is different. Anti-Semitism is the Jews are not hatred for what they do or for what they are, but for what they don't do or for what they are not. It means Jews that doesn't hate, you know, human being, etc. Jews doesn't practice and that doesn't have murderous practices, etc. They don't poison wells, they don't kill children, they don't spread disease and like plague, and this is the big difference. You don't hate, you don't despise Judaism, you hate the Jews, you fear them because they are evil, satanic people, etc. And then, and it's going to be the 12th century, the Jews became responsible as the misfortune of the world. 12 centuries after the Crusades, for many reasons I have no time to explain. So, and as I said, anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, is born in the 12th century, not in the 19th century, when the name was coined, etc. The hatred of the Jews born in the wake of the Crusades, of course, is still religiously inspired, but distinguishes itself from it by its totally irrational side. The hatred is not doctrinal, but of fantastical order. And this is important. This is, I would say, the mutation will finally lead to the extermination, of course, but stage by stage. And what are the stages? There are 4 stages of anti-Judaism. I speak again about anti-Judaism. The fact that we oppose Judaism as a religion, etc. The first one is the identification. The first Christians believed they were Jews. Actually, they were only Jews. They were only Jews at the beginning. All the apostles, they were Jews. And so we are the real Israel, and we are the continuation of Judaism, etc. Then the second stage is incomprehension. We are, and why they don't acknowledge it? Why? It's very strange, etc. And of course, it will lead to a morbid jealousy, and you can say also admirative hatred. And finally, lastly, it will be pure hatred. And this, for instance, if you consider someone like Luther, you will see at the beginning he was very pro-Jewish. He believed that the Jews will convert to his new, I would say, arrangement of Catholicism, etc. He believes it. And then when he realized that they won't, he became one, I would say, of the founding father of modern anti-Semitism. And the same with Muhammad. At the beginning, Muhammad was, well, actually he was held by Jews, by Jewish tribes. And then finally he resent them. And it will lead, you know, to the end of Jewish community in what is called today Saudi Arabia, with the total annihilation of the Jews in this peninsula, etc., with massacre, forced conversion, etc. And this is a very often, you know, Kaibar. I think, I don't know, but I suppose in America too, but for instance in France or in Belgium, very often when you have anti-Israeli demonstration, you will find people say, Kaibar, Kaibar, all the Jews to the gas. Yes. So it means that a battle in the 7th century after Jesus is still, you know, lived as something important, etc. Yet, while being despised and attack the Jewish people for wearing at time the word of God, remain largely sacred, if not envied. What I saw, admirative hatred, etc. It means that despite the hatred, Judaism cannot be treated as any pagan religion or belief. For the Christian and Muslim, Judaism is an offense, however not liable to death penalty, contrary to the heretics. Annihilation, and this is a difference I have with my friend Charles, annihilation is not advocated by the father of the church or even desire. And this is important, of course. And this is a good example. And this, I don't know, you know this poster. It's a poster, we are in Belgium, 1941. 1941, you know, it's, the Jews are persecuted and will be, you know, it's the beginning of the end. Already the Jews are killed, as you know, in Eastern Europe. And this is, you know, December 1941, conversion of the enemy of God. A Jew will convert his son to be saved. So they don't ask for the destruction of the Jew. We are 1941. And look, it's an anti-Judaist, of course, representation of the Jews. And here it says, la persévérance des néophytes. Means, and look, so 1941. And this is anti-Judaism. It's not anti-Semitism. And it will explain how many Jews actually were converted during the war. You know, many hidden children will be converted to Christianity, as you know. Forced ones, very often.
Joel,
So, yeah.
what is the last word?
Neophyte. Okay. I think it's I've got another poster, but I have no time, because there were different campaigns to convert the Jews during the war. So, what are the solutions with this, what I call neurosis? Cognitive dissonance. You have to cope with it. You have to live with it, because it's annoying to have those Jews still there, etc. And there are 3 solutions. The first one will be servitude and humiliation. In French, it will be exactly the same word. I suppose there was some French here now? In England? No, it's okay. So, Jews were considered as a necessary evil, an error in the truth, in the service of truth. And in the 4th century, Saint Augustine wrote that the Jews should not be killed, but condemned to dispersion and humiliation as a sign of church victory of the synagogue. It's a kind of condemnation to eternal servitude that will be maintained for centuries. And this is an example of, you know, the wandering Jews, as you know. It's very famous. The fact that the Jews didn't help Jesus, a Jew, didn't help, you know, during the... Exactly, and so he said, you will be condemned, etc., to go out of Judea for the end of the life. And I will ask you a question. What was the last state to recognize Israel, the state of Israel? The last European...
Vatican.
The Vatican. But you were not supposed to answer. Next time you will leave the room. At least he was listening to me. So this is of course, humiliation and servitude considering Christianity, but in a sense it was the same if you considered what I call the city of Islam. Then there was what they called the Pacte d'Omar, Omar Pact, or also the Jews were, in a sense, protected, but humiliated, or in a position, etc., of legal inferiority during the period of Islam, etc. So it's the equivalent, if you want. The second solution was criminalization. And Christianity, of course, is a question of deicide, the fact that the people of the Holy Alliance being responsible for Jesus' death, and I will go back to this, because this is what I called a fake news, maybe the first fake news in history. And the second one, of course, it has an equivalent in Islam, because some people said that Muhammad was poisoned by one of his Jewish slaves, and what is called the deicide on one side, the professorcide on the other side. Not only that the people of the First Alliance refused to recognize the last prophet, but poison him. This is criminalization, of course. And you can find still today this is the Francophone, French-speaking website, and they say the history of the poisoning of the prophet by a Jew. So it's still there. It still exists. And of course, people will say Arafat is, of course, he was poisoned in polonium, like the prophet was by the Jews, etc. There's always a continuity of the tropes, what you say in English, etc. Nothing is new, reinterpretation, etc. And of course, anti-Judaism can be violent. Of course, the father of the church, they were extremely violent. And an example is Saint Jean Chrysostom, who will insist on the Jews as responsible of the killing of Jesus. And also he will describe the synagogue as a brothel, etc., whatsoever. And of course, if you can read, it's worse than a whorehouse. It's the den of scoundrel and the repair of wild beasts, the temple of demons. Of course it could be. But before the 12th century, I don't think we will find a lot of trace of pogroms. There are no pogroms. Just words. But of course the words will finally give the birth in the 12th century of massacres. But there is a mutation, etc. And the third solution, so the first one, humiliation, the second was criminalization, and the third was theological response. And the Christian response will be theology of substitution or replacement. And the Muslim response will be theology of falsification. And so let's go first to the theology of, we spoke yesterday about it, theology of substitution. You know, this is, well, you will find hundreds of representations like this. This is of the cathedral in Strasbourg. This is the church. This is the synagogue. And you can see that they are both human beings. What you don't like in this human being is the fact that she is a Jew. But if she converts, she will become a human being. Okay? And this is the big difference. She is not dehumanized. And this is anti-Judaism. It's a big difference between anti-Semitism. And you will see the difference.
They're sisters as well.
And I think she's more sexy even, I would say, no? The synagogue, according to me. But she has problem. The problem is she is blind. Why?
Doesn't see Christ.
Because she doesn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. So she's blind. This is, comment on dit, la lance is broken. The spear is broken, which means that all the former alliance is caduc, is finished. And of course she has the Torah, but the Torah is secondary. We will still keep it, but it's going to be an annex to the real gospel, etc.
When was this, excuse me, I've
13th century.
13th century.
And but you will find many of the. But this is the most beautiful one. It's really, you can still see it in Strasbourg, and then you see the rigid church with the chalice. If you drink it, you can become a Christian. So a Jew can be saved, and this is and this is important. Voilà. And one of my favorite paintings you can find in Madrid, au Prado, and it's of maybe the best painter ever, the brother Van Eyck, Flemish one from Bruges, Belgium, and it's called the triumph of the church and the defeat of the synagogue. Of course, you can see Maria, and this is a detail, and you can see, look, again, the defeat of the Jews. The Jews, they don't want to hear, they don't want to see. This is supposed to be the great priest of Jerusalem, etc. It's written in Hebrew, and look, and also the Jews, they look like Flemish. But I think 13th century too. Yeah. 14th century. This is Brother Van Eyck. So the solution 3 for the Muslim, it's theology of falsification. So it means that, of course, it means that the Christianity is the Virus Israel. This is what it means. That the church.
Can you give the solution one more time? Sorry, you went past that slide so fast. Can you go back just for a second?
This one.
Yeah.
Theology of
Thank you.
substitution, replacement. It means that the church is, the Virus Israel is the church. The new language, sacred language, is Latin or Greek, because you also don't forget about the Greek. The new capital is not Jerusalem, it's Rome or Byzance. It means Constantinople. This is replacement. We are the new Jews, etc. We are the continuation. And the Muslim is different. It's theology of falsification. So they choose something else, and it means that, according to some doctor of the Muslim faith, the Torah and the Gospel are falsified, have been falsified, and the real Torah and the real Gospel announce Muhammad as the last prophet, etc. That Jesus is not the Messiah, is just a prophet announcing, the last Muhammad, etc., like Jean-Baptiste in the Gospel. You know that Jean-Baptiste considered himself as the Messiah. But then finally it was rewrite, etc., and he was presented as the precursor of Jesus, etc. And so an example, of course, that you have to go to internet, and I will say the example that and it's about the sacrifice of Ishmael. According to the Quran, which is not true actually, the sacrifice cannot be Isaac. According to authentic Islamic tradition, the sacrifice is Ishmael. The Muslim scholars have solved this case a long time ago, and very early in the history of Islam, the popular Islamic tradition has integrated the fact that Ishmael was a sacrifice, which is not actually true, because there are some debate. Let the Christian missionary study the Quran thoroughly before calling upon ghosts that will frighten nobody but themselves. Indeed, a biblical version of the story, sacrifice your only son Isaac, or sacrifice your firstborn son Isaac, is an enigma they must live with, etc. So you understand that this is theory of falsification. It means why what is called the Old Testament by the Christian is not considered sacred by the Muslim. It was rejected as such, etc. And this is different. So consequence of those three is, first, the Jews are at once totem and taboo. If you remember Sigmund Freud, it's à la totem and taboo, envied, despised, and humiliated, but still sacred and useful. And I have no time to explain that till the Crusades, the Jews were quite useful in the feudal, structure, etc. They were the prefiguration of, I would say, third sectors, etc. They were the church and the Jews, and then there were 3% of, I would say, of aristocrats, and the rest was, what do you say, peasants with no rights, etc. So the Jews were useful, but I have no time. Jews, tertiary sector embryo, another time. Consequence 2. The Jews are going to constitute the only minority tolerated within Christian and Muslim state, and of course, if you're the only minority tolerated, they will become gradually the usual suspect, or I would say the ideal scapegoat. And on this religious hostility to the Jews, but set up gradually as a cultural code, will arise at first traditional then modern anti-Semitism, then by tortuous one and complex process, the Nazi anti-Semitism, and finally, by a curious return of the history, current new Judeophobia and what we call radical anti-Zionism, etc. So, I stressed about the difference between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, but, and this is also important, the myth of Judah announced anti-Semitism. And this is really the core of what I want to say. The myth of Judah is the first fake news. And this is a very beautiful representation. You see Judah, who looks like a Jew, and Jesus, who doesn't look like a Jew, but both are. All those people in the Last Supper try to find a non-Jew, you want, and try to find a female, of course, and they were, of course, at the Last Supper, but they were excluded from the representation. And this is the difference between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Remember the representation of the synagogue, a beautiful lady, well, mistaken, but beautiful lady. This is supposed to be a Jew. Who is he? Judah. And what should be the fate of Judah? You know, he killed himself after realizing what he did. And Judah sold his soul to the devil, you know. The children is the soul of Judah, and you know his stomach remind us of the 6 denarius, because he was 30 denarius. He was paid to be betrayed, etc. And what is interesting to see that it's already a conspiracy theory. It's already a plot. What's the purpose of this myth? It's the fact that the Jews, the Sanhedrin, the prefiguration of the wise of the elders of Zion, etc., sell Jesus to Ponce Pilate. And you see, this is Judah touching his money, so it's a plot for money. So the Jews plotting for money, etc. And the criminal reason, they sell this beautiful blonde man. Again by Australian surfer. To whom? To Ponce Pilate. And Ponce Pilate is represented as a Jew. He has the Jewish head. No trace of Romanity in this. It's a pure Jewish affair. Nothing to do with Rome, etc. The same here, I showed it yesterday. Ponce Pilate again presented as a Jew, etc. And we're not in the 19th century, we are in the 13th century. And it helps us to explain that anti-Semitism is not a contemporary invention, it's a medieval, middle medieval, etc. invention, etc. And there you see again the miniature transformed the Roman soldiers into Jews, and the legend confirms it is the Jewish felon who put Jesus Christ on the cross. We are in the 15th century. And who were control on the church? Italian people, the descendant of the Romans. So you can understand why they say it's not our ancestor. We have nothing to do with this. It was them, etc. And again, Jesus and Jews, you know, doing the Jewish people, you can see on the head. No more Romans. Jews, etc. And this, we are in the 12th century. So you understand the importance of Judah. And you know what Judah means? It means Jews. It means a Jew. It's Jew who betrayed Jesus. But everyone was Jew, and Jesus himself. So this is extremely clever. The fact that the villain is a Jew. Not the Messiah. Not Peter. Not Jake. Only one. And this, of course, will help the mutation between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. After, you know, all this preparation of the father of the church, who accused for centuries the Jews of being responsible of Jesus' death, etc. And so from then on, anti-Semitism is entirely, already essentially a social construction, and neurosis turns into psychosis. It's no more a neurosis. You can cure from a neurosis. Now the relation between the church And the synagogue is very good. There are no more problems. You remember John Paul II went to a synagogue in Rome, and it's okay. And we have good relation. You can cure, but you cannot cure a psychotic. You cannot cure someone who believes that the Jews, they need to kill children, Christian children or Palestinian children to please them. You cannot cure. You cannot. You cannot cure a man who supposes that the Jews poison the well or cause COVID-19. You cannot. It's impossible. So it's a social disease. It's at the origin a neurosis of religious origin transmuted into a social psychosis. It's an obsessive passion. It's a major cultural shift, and it's in the late Middle Age that, as I said, that finally you will have this mutation, etc., with full-scale persecution, which didn't exist before, blood libels, massacre, forced conversion, and this is the beginning of the massacre. Beautiful representation of massacre of the Jews, etc. And then you know that with the Black Death epidemic devastated Europe, of course, annihilating more than half of the population, Jews were taken as scapegoat. Wonderful. One example. You can find traces. Well, the same, okay. With massacre, etc. And with very curious myth, and you know this one, the myth of the Jewish infanticide. The first occurrence is actually in England, 1144, in Norwich, when the child was found dead, and finally the Jews will be accused. And already it's a conspiracy plot, because the origin is the Jews of France of Narbonne asked the Jews of Norwich to kill a child. So it's already, we are in a conspiracy theory. And you will have 200 cases of blood libel. The last one, and let's say the most important one, will be 1946 in Kielce in Poland, where 44 Jews were killed after a rumor of blood libel, 1946, etc. And this is a representation you can find, and you will find a lot, etc. And finally, which is important to say, that of course all those children, for instance, Simon of Trento, who became a saint, were all desacralized after the Holocaust, after the Shoah. And this is a, how would you say, a post that you can find on the internet. Before I was a saint, but that was before Paul VI, Saint Simon of Trent, martyr, and look, this is more important, is réseau pédophile criminel, etc. Pédo-Holocaust, le crime rituel dans l'histoire, if you understand what it means. Ritual crimes in history and pedophilia Holocaust. This is the kind of website that you can find, of course. It means the psychotic aspect of anti-Semitism, etc. So then Jews become useless and superfluous. The economic resentment allied with traditional religious prejudice prompted the forced expulsion of Jews from several countries and regions. And I have no time, but time is running. But the first expulsion of Jews were England, 1290. The last one was 2 centuries after. Portugal, 1497, which means that beginning of the 16th century, there were no Jews in Europe. There were no Jews in Europe. There were Jews, of course, in some parts of Italy, north of Italy, some cities of Germany, of course, in what is called Holland today, Ottoman Empire, and 80% of the Jewish population lived in Poland. 80% of total Jewish population lived in Poland. So that's why when we speak about the fact that the Jew organized slavery, it's absurd. There were no Jews, especially not in Spain, not in Portugal, not in England, not in France. So how could you organize slavery if you don't exist? But still, you have someone like Dieudonné who will push, or like Farrakhan, who will insist on the fact that Jewish merchants organized slavery, etc. But there were no Jews, etc. And of course, when you don't have Jews, you need scapegoat. And this is the beginning, because you need, in a sense, minority as scapegoat, and this is when finally there was the how to say, the chasse aux sorcières, hunt witches. And it's after the expulsion of the Jews. It was not during Middle Age. The peak of the witch hunt was in the more the Renaissance. It was after the 15th century. And because, as I say, why? No more Jews. And so the classical period of witch hunt in early modern Europe and colonial North America folded into the early modern Europe, or about 1450 to 1750, spanning the upheaval of the Reformation and the 30 Years' War, resulting in an estimated 35 to 100,000 executions. Because society needs to find the explanation of evil. What?
And they have pointy hats.
What?
So they
Exactly.
pointy hats.
And they will have the Jewish hats. Exactly. The iconic hat of the Wicked Witch could reflect the association between black magic and the Jews.
And hooked noses,
Exactly.
like an obsolete.
Yeah, exactly.
No noise is there.
And this is important also to stress. The common fate, in a sense, between the Jews and the female in Western society, etc. Then I will more or less go on about modern anti-Semitism, which is, I would say, the continuation of, I would say, medieval anti-Semitism, etc. The Jews be considered as the foreigner, the invader, the banker, the communist, the other one racial, and, what is important, the successful one. At the origin, the Jews were poor, extremely poor. Most of the Jews came from Eastern Europe, because remember, 80% of the Jews live where? In Poland, means Russian Empire, etc. They were persecuted and they decided to come to Western Europe. And this is represent postcards describing, those Jews, etc., coming, by waves, thousands of them, and of course poor people, but it's written Bors. It means money. They are poor, but they're connected to money, and this is again related to Judah. The fact that, those people, they suck the blood and they suck the money. That's why the animal which always be connected to the Jews is the vampire. The bat. Traditionally. And so it's the unbearable Jewish success which explain also, in a sense, modern anti-Semitism. Before and now. Or anyway, if they're poor, whether they're rich or they're poor, anyway, we don't like them. It's the same. Whether they're communist or capitalist, we don't like them. Whether they're nationalist or international, we don't like. This is also a phenomenon of, etc. And what is racial anti-Semitism? It's, I would say, a reaction of an overly successful integration. It's a scientific justification for the rejection in a context of de-Christianization. It's a mutation, if you want. We cannot reject them because they're not Christian, because who cares about Christianity in a sense, but because, well, they are racially different, etc. And again, the same, etc. Racism, it's a modernization of initial rejection and reaction to integration. And this is, a kind of postcard, British postcards. Look, you see a Jew marrying an African, and it's supposed to be humoristic. What will be the harvest be? What will the harvest be? You imagine the words, of course. And the same there. And this is another postcards before the First World War, when Germany has colony in Africa, for instance, Zuidwest Africa, which is now Namibia. And the question is, look, be careful. This is a German citizen who married a Jew. Look how the children looks like. They look like Jews. It's terrible. And then you've got a German soldiers marrying an African lady. Look how the children looks like. So it means, please don't mix. Stay in your race, in your ethnicity, etc. And so it means that the Jews has to leave. They do not belong. They have to leave. And Deutschland, it means to the Deutsch. And they have to go, you will see, nach Palästina. Then before the war, the Jews has to go to Palestine. Another example, die Zukunft. It means whether they're rich, poor, female, integrated, not integrated, they have to go to where? Nach Palestina, to Palestine. The same year, nach Palestina. You saw those people, etc. And this reminds us of the genocide of the Armenians, who will be sent, to the desert of Iraq and Syria, and will disappear by millions. And of course, in certain areas, this is a postcard in Borkum, and it means it's a publicity of an hotel who said, come to my hotel, I guarantee there are no Jews in my hotel. It's Juden werden hier nicht geduldet. You won't find Jews, be reassured, okay? It's a good hotel. The one also in Cologne, in Köln, Eisige Freudenfreies Hotel. I promise, in my hotel you won't find any Jews, even, those people, those beggars, etc. This is a cafe in Frankfurt, the same. Here the Jews are not accepted, etc. This is Germany. But in America too, as you know, there are many Americans too. This is Miami, etc. And we are in Miami. We are in 1944, in May. The next month, Americans will liberate Europe from a racist regime, but in this hotel, colonial atmosphere, good, but restricted clientele. And restricted clientele, most Americans know, it means no Jews are accepted here. 1944, no Jews. Maybe restricted, it's not clear enough. Of course, the difference with America and with Germany, in Germany you say Jews, in America you cannot. You cannot, of course, it will be forbidden, I suppose. Another hotel, also in Miami, and here said strictly Gentile clientele. Okay, this is clear. Strictly Gentile. Be sure. And this is America. There have been very few hanging of Jews, lynching of Jews. This is a very famous Leo Frank case in the south of America. And this is in the country of my friend Charles. Here, Jews are not wanted here in Saint Agathe. So scram while the going is good. And this is in Canada.
This was very common.
Yeah, I suppose. And so boycott, etc. Ideal scapegoat by which to explain the world misfortune. This is Dreyfus. And Dreyfus, of course, betrayed France like Judas betrayed Jesus. He betrayed for money. Again, and he looks like Judas. In fact, when you see portrait of Dreyfus, he looked very French. He was totally French. But this man is a traitor. And this, again, it reminds us the first fake news of history. And of course, the Jews king of the world. If the Mujika exploit, it's because of the Jews. The first pogrom, and then Judeo-Bolshevik. So you see always what I try to explain, it's always conspiracy. And it means Bolshevism, it's a Jewish conspiracy. Then you see the Jews organizing almost a genocide of the Russian people. Then there's Judeo-Masonic plot. And you see rabbis, etc., plotting, to cause wars. And then what is important to say, that modernity, evil, and Jewish conspiracy. I have no time. And this is a very good postcard. I love this postcard. It's a French postcard called Dechristianization of France, and he explained what the process of modernization of society is. It means the village becomes cities, people living in village, in farming had to go to the industry, etc., whatsoever, and you need diploma to succeed. And so it means to succeed in a modern life, in modernity, in a sense, you have to go on the, you have to forget about Christianity, about religion. You have to forget about religion. So you have to accept to go on the corpse of the Christ. And then, of course, you will find peasants who refuse it. Very scandalized, the fact. And then you will find, people who would accept, of course, this process of dechristianization. But what is interesting in this postcard is who is organizing the destruction of France. First, you've got the Jewish bat. which Jews face. So it means the Jews are behind the process of separation of church and state, because we're just before 1904, the church, and then look the face of the French Republic. Well, it's a Jewish French Republic, etc. Of course, as we know, the beneficiary of modernity was the Jews, but also the female, also the sexual minority. But the Jews were accused, because this belonged to the cultural code. If something is wrong, it's because of the Jews. And so it means people will make a confusion between modernity and anti-Semitism, etc. It's because of the Jews that finally France abandoned its roots, and of course the roots was Christianity, etc. And this is the same, in a sense, in America. We are in 1907. This is us in the hand of the Jews, and the Jews are responsible of what? Of Wall Street, republicanism, and democracy. And what Judah ought to do, of course, to kill himself. And it means that this ignorance, the interpretation of modernity as a Jewish plot, in a sense, is universal. This is a British postcards. I don't know if you know this one. And this is, of course, it was published by white Russian who left Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. And it's called The Price of Tolerance. It's in 3 languages. So it means we emancipate the Jews, and you know what they did to us? They killed, they brought us terrible ideologies. They brought communism, Bolshevism, socialism, propaganda, finance, occultism, sweeter labor, cinema press, pacifism, etc. So it has nothing to do with Judaism. Well, of course, you will find here and in improbable Jewish writing, etc. But it means that Jews being considered as responsible of modernization, of the destruction of, the pillar of the society, etc. And so, etc. We have no time, and so it means that this is you could find on certain postcards, die soziale Frage is a Judenfrage. It means the social question is a Jewish question. It means let's forget about class war, but what is important is war. It's race war. This is important, and this is the origin, I would say, in the sense of Nationalsozialism. It means don't care about the division between workers and patrons. It means what is important is the fact between the Jews and the Aryan, etc. And of course, this very famous quote of the number 2 of the Social Democrats in Germany, Auguste Bebel, anti-Semitism is the socialism of idiots. Because some people believe that the enemy of the working class was the Jews, etc. And so, you remember, Jews be considered responsible of the defeat of 1918. Germans, think about it, those are the Jews, the Bolshevik and the capitalism, using the socialist and the Catholic, and they were there. Well, it was not a defeat of the army. They were betrayed. Again, the betrayal, like Judah. And what is the Weimar Republic? It's not a German republic, it's a Jewish republic. And so how can we cure Germany? Is by, getting rid of those people who ruin the soil, etc. Picture. And so, I have a few more, 2 minutes?
You have till 1 o'clock, but you should.
Okay, I will stop just to say about radical anti-Zionism, to show the what I call Altneu Antisemitismus. It means that about anti-Semitism, the Israeli Zionist Jews are hatred, and it's the same. I make the same differentiation between anti-Zionism and radical anti-Zionism, like I made between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. So what I call radical anti-Zionism, the Israeli Zionist Jews are not hatred for what they do or really are, a nation between the nations, but for what they do not. It means killing children, or are not. Evil creature with murderous practice, controlling capitalism system, the USA, poisoning Arafat, killing systematically Palestinian children, organizing a genocide, etc. So what is radical anti-Zionism is to consider Israel as being responsible of the misfortune of the world. So it's the same. And I've got some, in a sense, funny things to show you. It means even in Arabic countries there is a confusion between modernity and considering modernity as a Jewish plot. And this was made after, you know, the cartoons in Denmark against the prophet, etc. And you see the Jewish hands, and with the swastika and freedom and democracy, milk made in Denmark, which also, you know, show the confusion that I tried to explain to you, etc. And also in today, you know, imaginary of some people in the Arabic world, all the bad products of modernity are considered Jewish. McDonald's is a Jewish Zionist. Well, maybe because they mixed halav, maybe because of this. Milk and no, I'm joking, of course. No, because I try to find the reason. They are not, unfortunately not. McDonald's is supposed to be a Jewish thing. Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola, it's to support Israel. And there are a huge campaign to boycott Coca-Cola, considering Coca-Cola is a Zionist enterprise, etc. Pepsi means, you know, pay every pence to save Israel. You know it. If you want, I can show you, because this is from memory that I took. Pokemon also was supposed to be a Nippono-Zionisto-Darwinian conspiration. Because, you know, he's yellow, like yellow star. He looks like a yellow star. And it was forbidden in certain areas, like in the Emirate state, etc. And if you have 5 minutes, you want to see, you know, the fact that Tom and Jerry was considered as a Jewish. You want to see it? Sure. This is the Iranian TV. If I have sound.
یک کارتون محبوبی میان بچه‌ها هست. خیلی محبوب. بزرگان خیلی دوستش دارن. تام و جری. به قول برخی‌ها جاویدان والت دیسنی دیگه هستن.
C'est pas Walt Disney, hein? It's not Walt Disney. How could you put it better, in a better way?
و در سراسر جهان همچنان داره به نمایش میاد. همچنان.
No.
Walt Disney was an anti.
Yeah.
No, but I want to open it. How can I have it? Bon. Bon, I can't. Because there is a problem of... can you do it?
یک کارتون محبوبی میان بچه‌ها هست.
You understand?
خیلی محبوبه. بزرگان خیلی دوستش دارن. تام و جری. به قول برخی‌ها جاویدان والت دیسنی دیگه هستن. کمپانی والت دیسنی یهودی با این کارتون تو جهان گل کرد و در سراسر جهان همچنان داره به نمایش میاد. همچنان اون جایگاه خاص خودش رو با ملاحت‌ها و شیرین‌کاری‌هایی که موش و گربه به ویژه موش داره همچنان جایگاه خودش رو حفظ کرده. میگن علت اصلی ساخت این با در حقیقت کارتون بسیار جذاب حذف یک لقب بوده در اروپا. شما برید تاریخ اروپا رو بخوانید ببینید که قدرت اصلی در جمع آوری و تمرکز و تکاثر ثروت و سرمایه در قرن 19 کیا هستن؟ اکثرا یهودی‌ها هستن. شاید یکی از علت‌های این که وقتی مثلا جریان یهود ستیزی رو هیتلر راه انداخت و برخی تبلیغات وسیع که صورت گرفت سر کوره ها که البته مواردش درسته، حالا اینجوری نیست که ما از اون ور بیافتیم این کل نه، واقعا شما فیلم فهرست شیندلر رو ببینید اونجا بنابر این بود که هر کسی یهودیه حتما یه ستاره روی لباسش بزنه و اصلا یهودی پست و اصطلاح موش کثیف تا مجری اصلا ساخته شد تا تصور اروپا از موش عوض بشه. اصطلاح موش کثیف یکی از مواردی که به کار می‌بردن این بود. یکی از مواردی که به کار می‌بردن این بود که خدمتتون عرض می‌کنم خب موش اگر دقت کرده باشید به شدت موذیه و کثیف. یعنی در میان اقوام و ملل هیچ تمدنی مثل یهود زیرپوستی عمل نمی‌کنه. شما سرگذشت یهود رو تو اروپا بخوانید تا نهایت مثلا به اون بغض و نفرت هیتلری انجام کرد. هیتلر هم پشت پرده یه زد و بندهایی داشته با اون پروتکل ها اینجوری که مشخصه. خدمتتون عرض بکنم که این تاموجری ساخته شد تا این تصورش دقیقا عکسش بشه و به همین دلیل شما حالا از فردا این کارتون رو که ببینید، حالا با این بحث من ببینید از این زاویه، یعنی موشه به شدت زیرک، باهوش و حرکاتی که خیلی ملاحت داره، حرکاتی که میزنه گربه بدبخت پدرش در بیاره، ولی نحوه این ستم به گونه ای نیست که سبب انزجار شما از فعل این موش بشه.
Funny, no?
مثلا زیباییش، نمیدونم زیرکیش، این دقیقا میگن که میخواست اون تصوره رو تو ذهن بچه های اروپایی پاک میکنه که با اون موش کثیف نیست، یه چنین قدرتی هم داره. به هر حال از این قضایا ما زیاد داریم تو متاسفانه هالیوود و برنامه هالیوود.
Female separate, of course. But they took notes, not the men. Did you see?
This was really Sacha Baron Cohen, wasn't it?
What? Yes, it looks like. So sometimes you can laugh with anti-Semitism, no? Well, and so to finish, the fact that Gaddafi portrays as a Jew, Assad, you know, he was a Hasidic Jew, the best friend of what is it called, Smotrich. This is Morsi, Ghanouchi, you know, of Tunisia, a better representation of Ghanouchi. And this is Egyptian journalist, you know, President al-Sisi mother is Jewish, and tell you that he is a Jew, what ties to the Jews, guys, all the action are Jewish, everything he does is for the Zionists, etc. I mean, I said this is even in French, and of course Atatürk being also denounced as a Jew. And so this is also funny. Look what Coca-Cola means, you know this one?
What is this?
A lot of imagination, you know. Anti-Semites have more imagination than we have. So it means no Mohammed, no Mecca. Coca-Cola. And then this is funny. You can't understand French, but it means in the name of Allah, please don't eat any more tomatoes, because if you eat tomatoes, you become a Christian. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So we have 15 minutes for Q&A.
My English is bad. I don't need questions.
Sooner.
No.
Sooner.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of clarify the McDonald's one. I think,
Yeah.
so McDonald's, when the Romans would invade lands, they had a symbol, the ark,
Mm-hmm.
the M. So even McDonald, when he created McDonald, the ark represented conquering your hunger, right? So because through anti-Semitism, Jews were seen as this white elite hegemonic force, then whenever McDonald is set up,
Yeah, I agree.
countries, foreign
Yeah.
countries, Starbucks, even in gentrified areas, when you see a Starbucks or a McDonald's, it's a sign of imperialists. So I think that's where some of that symbol is coming from. And even the Looney Tunes, growing up, Bugs Bunny was the slick Jew, right? I mean, it's documented, you know, Daffy Duck was this outrageous coon or black person, right? When he blew up, he looked like this exaggerated, featured African-American person.
Really?
You know, Porky Pig was this slow, white, poor person, right? Who could be manipulated and exploited. So it's interesting that all of that same, you know, misinformation from the United States, 1920s, 1930s, is finding its way into these Middle Eastern countries. I guess my question is, you know, I like how you put it. It's you know, anti-Semitism is not neurosis; it's psychosis, and so it can't be cured. Do you think for those who are ignorant, right?
Oh yeah, cool.
Is anti-Semitism a mental health disorder? Could it be something that, you know, through our curriculum, through our investigations with our students, that we help to re-educate and re-engineer their thinking in the world, so it becomes a neurosis and no longer just this psychosis?
No, I agree with you. You can be cured. It means the majority of the people that are not, they don't have the psychosis. It means the producer are. It means like Dieudonné or Soral in France or David Dees in America, etc. Those people, you cannot discuss with them. 20 years ago, I tried to discuss with deniers of the Holocaust, and I realized it was impossible. But of course, I teach to my students, and it helps a lot. Because, of course, definitely, because ignorance is the first factor. And so if you, education is essential. Unfortunately, how many can we educate? We cannot educate the majority, that's the problem. But of course, I'm not a fatalist. Be careful with your English, huh?
Yeah. I'll speak very slowly. It's interesting you show this picture of the Salvin Book of Hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you realise, but it has a connection to Oxford.
No,
It's
of course not.
produced in the Diocese of Lincoln, of which Oxford was part. And also, interestingly, in my researches in Lincoln, I found a decorative medieval roof tile which used that image of the high priest and placed it as like a gargoyle on a rooftop. But also, if you go into the Ashmolean Museum, there's a 13th century chimney pot with the same Jewish head on it with the high priest hat, but there are holes where the ears are and the nose are, and you could walk down the street there because it was found just near the town hall, and you could see this image of a Jew with smoke and possibly flames coming out of its ears and nose. So it's interesting how these things mutate. But also, you might be interested that in Lincoln Cathedral there's some very extreme anti-Semitic, or you say anti-Judaic images. But one of the key ones is the story, the legend of Theophilus, where a Jewish middleman is selling a deacon's soul to the devil, and central to this is a picture of a Jewish contract. And when I finally got a telescopic lens on it, it even has pseudo-Hebrew on it. And so at this important juncture, the identification between Jews, money, contracts, and the devil, and selling Christian souls to the devil was absolutely identified. So it's one of the very, very early examples of this diabolical, nature of Jewish financial dealings. You might, if you want to.
Yes, definitely. Of course.
Interesting. Yeah.
Sold.
Yes.
I thought this was a wonderful presentation, and I hope you're going to share the images with us. I don't know if that's something you'd be willing to do. But I was wondering if you could clarify. You sort of made a really good case for showing us images of this transition in the around the period of the Crusades, from anti-Judaism to anti-Semitism. But could you elaborate more on why you think that was the moment?
Okay. So there are different things. Because we say that sometimes anti-Semitism arises in situation of crisis, but not only crisis, it could be also economical mutation, because the mutation came actually in a period of renewal of Western civilization. There were 11th centuries first. There were, before 1100, as I said, the Jews were very useful. They were performing what the aristocracy didn't want to have. How would I say, a national bourgeoisie to arise. They were afraid of them, so they were using the Jews and the church, and both of them being castrated castes. They were castrated. What did it mean? They were giving a lot of power to the church under the condition that they cannot reproduce themselves. So they were condemned to be, not to be able to marry, and this was a castrate. And also the Jews. The Jew was useful because you can have Jews to perform a certain number of functions, essential, and if you dislike them, you can expel them. And anyway, a Jew will never contest will never ask for political demands, etc. But after the 11th century, there was there was the will of nationals to fulfill those tasks. It means also to be merchants, also to be doctors, also to be etc. and there was a competing. And this is one of the reasons. And it will be the emergence of, I would say, national bourgeoisie, or all those, very useful things. And for instance, people are, associated with banking, but the real bankers, they were Italians, the Medicis, they were people from Lombardy, etc. And this is, so this is the, la croissance, the birth, I would say, of medieval Europe, etc. And the second thing is millenarist fear in the year 1000, the venue of the Antichrist, Jews being linked to the Antichrist. So if you kill the Jews before, it means maybe it will save you from the venue of the Antichrist. And the third thing will be the Crusades, of course, when they will discover the other, the Muslim. And some people will say, of course, they are infidels, but the worst infidels are within us. They killed the Christ. And so this is more or less mixed. So there are economical, sociological, theological reasons, and also the speech for centuries of the father of the church, who prepare for this mutation. But what it seems to be important, it's that before 1100, there were no anti-Semitism from the top and from the bottom. It was just anti-Judaism, because the relation was not so bad between the Jews and Christians. This you have to understand it. And the prince was protecting the Jews, because, as I said, they were useful. And suddenly everything mutates, and it was the beginning of the end.
Thank you.
I hope I will be, in French I'm better.
So,
I'm better anyway.
Hi. So I kind of have a comment that I just want to offer as food for thought and maybe see what we think about it. But so I was thinking a lot about the picture you showed with the monkey and the black man
Yeah.
and the Jewish man. And personally, I'm here to try to learn how to combat anti-Semitism by bridging the gap between anti-Semitism and racism. So far, I've learned that if someone is anti-Semitic, they're also usually racist. And so I noticed that when you were explaining that particular picture, your verbiage was like, of course, the black man looks more like the monkey than the Jewish man, and I just kind of
No, it's not what I say.
I'm sorry?
No, it's not what I say.
Okay, can you kind of clarify more your thoughts on that picture?
He said the opposite.
No, I say the opposite.
He said the opposite.
I say the opposite. It means that maybe for basic racists it looks like because he's naked, like the animal, but in fact not. The real racists will believe that the Jews looks more like. Sometimes you have to put yourself, in the spirit of the racist. You have to understand it. Yeah, you need to understand. Even if you're not, especially if you're not. But you have to explain, you have to understand. And of course it's not easy, but you're forced to deconstruct. But I've got a special presentation about Nazi cartoon representing blacks and Jews. Another time.
Naomi, I literally had the same question, but I just follow up. When you say anti-Semitism, the real start of it was after the 12th century, not.
What the?
Sorry?
Repeat?
Oh, when you say anti-Judaism mutated into anti-Semitism
Yeah.
at the 12th century to the 19th century, is this because you're framing it in terms of, anti-Judaism being like a neurosis and then anti-Semitism
Yeah.
being like a, if you were to look at it differently, could you argue a different start date or era for anti-Semitism?
I didn't understand.
can you repeat?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because also I'm quite old.
Because you framed it as a
Yeah.
neurosis.
Yes?
Morphing into a psychosis.
Yeah?
Is this why you've also chosen anti-Semitism, like it starts post-12th century?
Yeah, of course.
If you framed it differently, like not as a, in terms of mental health, could you argue that anti-Semitism, it emerged in a different era?
She's asking if your explanatory terms dictate a certain historiography.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. I would say most of the modern historians will agree with me, like Mikoli, or also if you see Nierenberg now, the very famous scholar, etc., consider it. I think Gavin Langmuir, who was also a Canadian, etc., definitely considered the importance of the medieval, in the construction of anti-Semitism. But according to me, for instance, the emergence of anti-Semitism within the Arabic world in the 19th century, because till the 19th century, it was anti-Judaism and not anti-Semitism. When I spoke about the mutation, it's only for the Christian civilization. Only the Christian civilization. Within Islam, it was later on. Now, today, you've got anti-Semitism as a conspiracy, but not before I would say, the 19th century. I'm sorry.
So two things. I know you don't have time. But
Yes.
I wanted to point out.
We can discuss it later on, because you're a specialist. Okay.
Much later on. In the 20th century, you mentioned the Leo Frank trial here in the United
Yeah.
States. Sorry, not saying here.
Yeah.
In the United States in 1913.
Yeah.
In 1903 was the Bayless trial in Russia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The cartoons at that time depicted it was a blood libel trial accusing Jews of killing a Russian child.
Exactly.
And the cartoons at the time depicted the child as Jesus. That he was Jesus. And
Yeah.
that Jews were killing him. And
Exactly.
And like Jews. The other thing I wanted to ask you, this is very unusual. You said the improbable writing in one of the cartoons. I didn't get a good look at it. I'd like to look at it later. It appears to be Rashi script, écriture Rashi.
Écriture?
Rashi.
Okay.
Yes. So
Ah.
I don't know if they actually were able to write something.
I don't
They
think
just
so.
copied the script. It's very unusual. Usually they copy the other Hebrew script.
Yeah, but I think it's nothing. I will show it to you.
Maybe gibberish, yes.
Yeah.
But it was very unusual to see that.
Okay. But I fully agree with you, of course. Ritual murder is transcription of the killing of Jesus, of course. Of course. And when you see the Simon of Trento, he's like Jesus on his cross.
Yes.
Of course.
The other thing about this, it was the 20th century, and there were some people in Russia who they felt this is the 20th century. How could this be?
It's true.
And there were some intelligentsia who were so disturbed by it that there were people who came in volunteers to testify on behalf of the Jews, and there was a movement at the time they were outraged. This shouldn't be the face of Russia. This is of course before the
But
Bolsheviks.
Baylis was innocent, finally.
So
Yeah, he was not fine.
At the end, which is even Baylis himself was declared innocent, but there were two questions that the jury was asked. One was he innocent? And the second one was, do the Jews commit ritual murder?
Oh.
And the second one was yes, they
Yes, of course.
So the outcome of the
I
trial
know
was
it.
Baylis himself,
Ah.
he didn't do it, but
But-
the Jews do commit ritual murder in the 20th century.
That's interesting. Thank you.
So, a final question, then we're going to break for lunch.
Thank you so much, Joel. Just briefly, would you elaborate on the link between
The lady over there,
anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, with the idea of Israel bashing? I think was discussed by Charles. Do you think anti-Zionism is another way of trying to cover anti-Semitism?
Attendez. Yeah, I will show you one thing. But maybe there's another question. The last one that you say. No, the lady there.
Okay.
No? Comment est-ce qu'on fait ça? Attends. Pourquoi ça marche pas? Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
You want me to ask?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Well, I'd like to follow up on Denise's question because I think the point
Pourquoi ça
is
marche pas?
that it's not one or the other. It's not the Jew or the black person. It's both on the image.
Exactly.
So
It's true.
it's not even necessarily who is closer
Of course.
to the monkey. It's that they're both on the image.
Yeah.
And
It's a question.
This
Yeah.
calls into question
Marche pas.
even the periodization of the first presentation. question from Dr. Small, because this seems to, you know, the racialization of the Jew is not something that happens in the 19th century, right? It's already present, certainly as early as the Inquisition, when conversion cannot take
It's true. This is the
sufficiently of the Jew, so that because he has, you know, his blood is unclean, so his blood is unclean. So I think it's really important to go back to this issue and not assume that we're just talking about, you know, racial construction from the 19th century forward.
no.
I think her point is well taken. We need to take into consideration.
Thanks.
I will answer to you. I agree. It's when you have only an hour, you have to be, concise. And of course, the problem with limpieza of sangre, it's very important, of course. It's a prefiguration of racial anti-Semitism. But it's also socially, it can be explained. They converse the Jews, but the Jews succeed too well. So they didn't succeed to get rid of the Jews. So that's why they had to find another way to take their position. This is also social. You can explain it. I will give you an answer after, okay?
I'll answer briefly.
Okay.
I did a study with Ed Kaplan on, we interviewed 10,000 people in Europe in 10 different countries. We asked them questions. Excuse me, give me 2 minutes, please. We asked them questions on issues of classical forms of anti-Semitism and then questions on Israel bashing. And we found the level of anti-Semitism and Israel bashers in the 10 European countries relatively low, lower than we thought. But those who bash Israel are 13 times more likely than the average population to be anti-Semitic in the classical sense. So the correlation is off the charts. So people who are anti-Israel are 13 times more likely than the average population to be anti-Semitic. So it's a strong correlation.
You want to speak? Okay.
Just one remark on this picture where you have the Jews and the blacks. that has to do with the immediate post-World War I situation that the French held parts of Germany. And there starts the legend that the Jews bring the blacks into Germany in order to get a mixed German situation, which will then downplay the strength of Germany. And this Hitler writes about it in Mein Kampf also.
Exactly, yeah.
So it is the Jews who brought the blacks into Germany.
And then also another, we're just one final point because we can go on and we'll miss lunch. When the Germans committed a genocide in Namibia, a lot of the soldiers, the German soldiers that carried out the genocide, became officers, SS officers, when they went back to Germany in the Third Reich. So there's a connection. There's a connection between the genocide in Namibia. No, there's fantastic books on this. We can.
I know.
I wrote articles on Namibia.
So anyways, there's a connection between this as well.